She smiled at me like a friend, but behind my back, she turned my lifelong dream to ashes with just one phone call. I'll never forget standing in that brightly lit office, hearing someone else had taken the seat that was rightfully mine. From that moment, I swore I wouldn't just reclaim justice for myself, I would bury their entire fake world. They thought they'd crushed me, but they'd only awakened something far more dangerous. This is how I brought down the untouchable CEO and his vindictive wife. My name is Claire Donovan, and at 34, I'd built my entire identity around my career at Vanguard Dynamics. The glass towers of our headquarters in Riverside, Illinois, had become my second home. Hell, more like my first home, considering I spent more waking hours there than in my actual apartment. I was the senior project manager for our Emerging Technologies division, a title I'd earned through 12-hour days, sacrificed weekends, and more all-nighters than my body should have survived. Vanguard Dynamics wasn't just another tech company riding the wave of digital transformation. We were the wave itself, pioneering AI solutions that Fortune 500 companies begged for. The office culture was exactly what you'd expect from a modern American tech giant. Open floor plans with standing desks, kombucha on tap in the break rooms, and motivational quotes plastered on exposed brick walls. But beneath the Silicon Valley wannabe aesthetic lurked something more primal, a hunger for power that turned colleagues into competitors and friends into informants. I'd learned to navigate these waters like a shark. My team consistently delivered projects under budget and ahead of schedule. The algorithm optimization system we developed last quarter had saved our clients collectively over $40 million. Numbers like that don't go unnoticed, especially not by Richard Ellison, our CEO. He'd personally commended my work at 3 consecutive quarterly meetings, each praise more glowing than the last. The executive director position for product development had been vacant for 2 months. Everyone knew it was mine. Hell, even the janitor Carl had started calling me Director Donovan as a joke when he'd see me leaving the office at midnight. My colleagues would ask me about my plans for the department, and recruiters from competitors had started circling, sensing blood in the water if I didn't get the promotion I deserved. But I wasn't going anywhere. This was my moment. 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder, of proving that a girl from a working-class family in Des Moines could make it in the big leagues, had led to this. My parents, who'd never understood why I chose PowerPoints over grandchildren, would finally see what I'd been building toward. My ex-boyfriend, who'd left because I cared more about spreadsheets than spending time together, would realize what he'd walked away from. The interview process had been a formality. 3 rounds with various board members, each one practically winking at me as they asked about my vision for the future of Vanguard's product development. I'd prepared a 90-slide presentation that I never even had to open. They already knew what I could do. The final interview with Richard himself had felt more like a strategy session between future partners than an evaluation. "Claire," he'd said, leaning back in his Italian leather chair, the Chicago skyline glittering behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. "You remind me of myself 20 years ago. Hungry, relentless, uncompromising." Those words had echoed in my mind for weeks. In the corporate world, there was no higher compliment from a CEO than being compared to their younger self. It was basically a coronation. What I didn't know then, what I was too naive or too confident to see, was that being Richard Ellison's favorite was the most dangerous position in the entire company. Not because of Richard himself, but because of the woman who shared his bed, who wore his ring, and who had her manicured fingers wrapped around his every decision. Margot Ellison. My name is Margaret Collins, Maggie to those who once pretended to care. And until that Monday, I'd been Senior Director of Strategic Operations at Stratton Dynamics for 25 years. I'd arrived at my corner office at 6:47 a.m., as always, my Starbucks dark roast still steaming, the Denver skyline painted gold by the rising sun. The city looked beautiful from the 32nd floor, deceptively peaceful. The email arrived at 7:03 a.m. Subject line, Organizational Restructuring. Action required. My fingers hovered over the mouse for a moment. In 25 years, I'd seen enough corporate euphemisms to recognize an execution order. But nothing prepared me for the surgical coldness of those 12 words buried in the third paragraph. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. Around me, the office hummed with its usual Monday morning energy. Through the glass walls of my office, walls I'd earned through decades of 60-hour weeks, I watched my team settling in. Jessica, barely 25, was adjusting her standing desk. Brad, fresh from Wharton, laughed at something on his phone. None of them looked up. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I reached for my access card, swiped it against the reader on my desk. The light flashed red, already dead. They'd killed my digital existence before I'd even finished my coffee. The email continued with manufactured sympathy. This decision reflects our commitment to technological adaptation and agile workforce optimization. Translation: you're too old to keep up. They didn't say it outright. HR had trained them better than that. But the subtext screamed from every carefully chosen word. At 50, I'd become a liability, a relic in their shiny new world of disruption and innovation. I stood, my heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. Industrial chic, they called it. Though I remembered when offices had actual warmth. Through the glass, I saw Tom Chen from IT approaching with a security guard. Tom, whom I'd hired 8 years ago when he was just a nervous kid from Berkeley. He couldn't meet my eyes. Maggie, he said, stopping at my door's threshold. I need to collect your laptop, phone, and access cards. The security guard, younger than my daughter, shifted uncomfortably. His hand rested on his radio like I might suddenly turn violent. As if 25 years of building this company's infrastructure could explode into rage in an instant. I handed over the devices. Each one felt like surrendering a piece of myself. The laptop containing thousands of files I'd created, strategies I'd developed, problems I'd solved at 2 a.m. when the young guns were out drinking. The phone with contacts I'd cultivated over decades. The access cards that had opened every door in this building, until now. There's a box on your assistant's desk, Tom mumbled. For your personal items, you have 15 minutes. 15 minutes to pack up a quarter century. I moved through the ritual of corporate death with mechanical precision. The photos from my desk, Sophie's graduation, our last family vacation before the divorce, the awards gathering dust on the shelf, suddenly meaningless acrylic and engraved lies. The coffee mug Sophie had made in 3rd grade that said, World's Best Mom, in uneven purple letters. My colleagues, former colleagues, kept their heads down, suddenly fascinated by their screens. Only Linda from accounting dared to glance up, her eyes wide with the fear that every employee over 45 now carried. She looked away quickly. Logan Pierce passed by, our 31-year-old CEO, all sharp suits and disruption rhetoric. He was discussing exciting new talent acquisitions with someone on his AirPods, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been discarded. He walked past my office without a glance, as if I'd already been erased from the building's memory. The security guard escorted me to the elevator. The ride down 32 floors took 43 seconds. I counted each one. In the lobby, the receptionist, new, probably 22, smiled brightly and wished me a great day, oblivious to the box in my arms that contained the remnants of my professional existence. The January air hit me like a slap. I stood on the sidewalk, holding my pathetic box, watching the morning rush of young professionals streaming into the building, their whole lives ahead of them, confident in their indispensability. I wanted to warn them, someday, you too will become inconvenient. But I didn't. I walked to my car in silence, placed the box in the trunk with unnecessary care, and sat behind the wheel for a long moment. The parking garage was cold, fluorescent lights humming their industrial song. In the rearview mirror, I caught my reflection, 50 years old, silver streaks I'd stopped hiding, laugh lines that had apparently become liability lines. They thought they'd deleted me. They had no idea what they'd just created. The announcement was scheduled for Friday, March 15th, at the all-hands meeting. I'd bought a new suit for the occasion, A charcoal gray power suit that cost more than my first month's rent in Riverside. I'd even splurged on professional hair and makeup that morning, wanting to look the part when Richard introduced me as the new executive director. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., an hour before usual, too excited to sleep. The conference room was already being set up with rows of chairs facing the podium. I could picture myself standing there beside Richard, shaking his hand while everyone applauded. Maybe it was premature, but I'd already drafted my acceptance speech in my head. At 9:58 a.m., I took my seat in the third row, close enough to stand quickly when called but not so close as to seem presumptuous. The room filled with the familiar faces of my colleagues, many offering knowing smiles and subtle thumbs up. They all knew. Richard walked to the podium at exactly 10 a.m., his presence commanding immediate silence. But something was off. His usual confident swagger seemed forced, and he avoided eye contact with me entirely. "Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to announce that after extensive consideration, we've selected our new executive director of product development." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. "Please join me in congratulating Derek Morrison." The words hit me like a physical blow. Derek Morrison? The guy who'd been with the company for barely 2 years? Who'd fumbled the Henderson account so badly we'd nearly lost a $10 million contract. I sat frozen while everyone around me clapped, my mind unable to process what I'd just heard. Derek walked to the podium, his mediocre navy suit and nervous smile a stark contrast to what should have been my moment. I don't remember the rest of the meeting. The world had taken on a strange, muffled quality, like I was underwater. After the meeting, I went straight to Richard's office. His assistant, Patricia, gave me a pitying look but didn't try to stop me. Richard was standing at his window, clearly expecting me. "Claire." "What happened?" My voice was steady, professional. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. "3 weeks ago, you literally told me I was the future of this company." He turned, and for the first time in my career at Vanguard, Richard Ellison couldn't meet my eyes. Things change. The board felt Derek's profile was better suited for the role at this time. "His profile?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean the fact that he's incompetent but safe? That he won't threaten anyone?" "Richard, you know my numbers. You know what I've done for this company. The decision is final, Claire." His voice had taken on that CEO tone, the one that brooked no argument. "I suggest you congratulate Derek and focus on your current responsibilities." I left his office with my dignity intact, but barely. It wasn't until I was in the bathroom stall that I let myself cry, hot, angry tears that ruined my expensive makeup. Later that day, I found out the truth from Patricia. She pulled me aside near the parking garage, glancing around nervously before speaking. "It was Margot," she whispered. "Mrs. Ellison. She was at the office 2 weeks ago, saw your presentation materials on Richard's desk, saw all the notes he'd made about your exceptional leadership and innovative vision." My stomach turned. And she threw a fit. Patricia from HR overheard her in Richard's office. She accused him of having an affair with you. Said you were too young, too attractive, too ambitious to be trusted in a senior position. She made him promise to give the position to someone else. But that's insane. I've literally never had a conversation with Richard outside of work contexts. Patricia shrugged sympathetically. "Margot Ellison doesn't need evidence. She just needs suspicion. And honey, you committed the cardinal sin. You made her husband excited about something that wasn't her." That night, I sat in my apartment with a bottle of wine, staring at my laptop screen showing Derek's LinkedIn announcement about his new position. 57 congratulations already. The knife twisted deeper with each notification. Margot Ellison had destroyed my career because of her petty jealousy. She'd never even met me properly, just seen me from afar at company events. But that was enough for her to decide I was a threat to her marriage, to her perfect life as a CEO's wife. She'd smiled at me once, at the company Christmas party. A perfect, practiced smile that I now realized had been pure calculation. sizing me up like a predator evaluating prey. And she'd won. With just a few whispered words to her husband, she'd taken everything I'd worked for. But as I stared at Derek's smiling photo, something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. Margot Ellison had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She'd taken my promotion, but she'd given me something far more valuable, a reason to destroy her entire world. The weeks following the announcement were a masterclass in professional humiliation. Derek, in his infinite incompetence, was assigned to shadow me to learn the ropes of the department he was supposed to lead. I had to sit there, training my replacement, teaching him everything from our client management system to the quarterly reporting structure I'd personally designed. "So, Claire," he'd say, leaning over my desk with coffee breath that made me nauseous. "Can you walk me through the Morrison algorithm again? I want to make sure I present it correctly to the board." The Morrison algorithm. He'd already renamed my work after himself. My team watched with barely concealed disgust as Derek stumbled through meetings, misquoted statistics, and made promises to clients we couldn't possibly keep, but they also started keeping their distance from me. In corporate America, failure is contagious. Being passed over for such a visible promotion marked me as damaged goods, someone who'd peaked and was now on the decline. The invitations to strategic meetings stopped coming. My input on critical decisions was no longer requested. Even my reserved parking spot was reassigned to Derek, leaving me to hunt for spaces in the overflow lot like an intern. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each one precisely designed to remind me of my new place in the hierarchy. My relationship with James, already strained by my work hours, finally snapped. He'd planned a romantic dinner the night of the announcement, expecting to celebrate with champagne. Instead, he found me 3 glasses deep into a bottle of grocery store Merlot, still in my power suit, mascara streaked down my cheeks. "Maybe this is a sign," he said, trying to be supportive. "Maybe it's time to focus on us, on starting a family. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "Claire?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he'd never understood me at all. He was relieved I hadn't gotten the promotion. One less obstacle to his vision of suburban domesticity, of me becoming someone's wife and mother instead of someone. "Get out," I said quietly. "Claire, I didn't mean—" "Get out, James. We're done." He left, and I felt nothing. Another piece of my life crumbling away. But what did it matter? The life I'd built was already in ruins. My parents called the following week. News of my professional disappointment had somehow reached them in Des Moines, probably through my sister, who'd always resented my success. "Honey, maybe it's time to come home," my mother suggested gently. "Your father knows someone at the Wells Fargo branch here. It's not what you're used to, but it's stable, and you'd be close to family." Wells Fargo, in Des Moines. After everything I'd achieved, they wanted me to slink home in defeat and process mortgage applications for the rest of my life. "I'm fine, Mom." "You don't sound fine, Claire. There's no shame in admitting when something isn't working out." But there was shame. Burning, searing shame that kept me up at night, replaying every interaction with Richard, wondering what I could have done differently. Should I have been less competent? Less visible? Should I have deliberately dimmed my light to avoid threatening Margot's fragile ego? The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was in the break room when I overheard 2 junior analysts gossiping. "I heard she actually thought she had it in the bag," one whispered. "Had her acceptance speech ready and everything." "God, how embarrassing," the other replied. Though honestly, she was always a bit too aggressive. You know what they say about women who try too hard in corporate. Yeah, they end up alone with their PowerPoints for company. They laughed, and something inside me shattered. But it wasn't my spirit, it was my last restraint, my final hesitation about playing by the rules. That night, I sat in my apartment, laptop open, staring at a blank document. At the top, I typed, "The Ellison Project." If Margot Ellison thought she could destroy me without consequences, she was about to learn otherwise. The corporate world had taught me many things. how to analyze weaknesses, how to exploit opportunities, how to build strategies that decimated competition. Skills I'd only ever used for Vanguard's benefit. Now, I would use them for myself. I started with research, the kind of deep dive I'd typically reserve for a major acquisition target. Richard and Margot Ellison weren't just wealthy, they were visible, social, connected. That meant they had a trail, and trails could be followed. Their social media was a goldmine of narcissism. Margot's Instagram showcased their Lake Forest mansion, their yacht on Lake Michigan, their charity galas where she played Queen Bee. Richard's LinkedIn was full of thought leadership articles he definitely hadn't written himself. Together, they painted a picture of a couple who believed they were untouchable. But everyone has secrets. And in my experience, the people who worked hardest to appear perfect usually had the darkest ones. I closed my laptop at 3 a.m., my mind buzzing with possibilities. They'd taken my promotion, my reputation, my future at Vanguard. They'd cost me my relationship, though that was probably a mercy. They'd made me a laughingstock, a cautionary tale about women who flew too close to the sun. They thought they'd broken me. Instead, they'd freed me. Because when you have nothing left to lose, you become the most dangerous person in the room. And I was about to show them exactly how dangerous that could be. The first rule of warfare is to know your enemy. I spent the next month becoming an expert on Richard and Margot Ellison. And what I discovered was a goldmine of corruption wrapped in Hermes scarves and Armani suits. Richard's rise to CEO hadn't been the inspiring bootstrap story he peddled in interviews. Through careful analysis of SEC filings and cross-referencing with employee records, I uncovered a pattern. Every major competitor for his position had mysteriously left the company after personal scandals that seemed to materialize from nowhere. One had been accused of insider trading. Charges later dropped, but not before destroying his reputation. Another had private emails leaked, suggesting inappropriate relationships with subordinates. The deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became. Richard Ellison didn't win. He eliminated competition through systematic character assassination. But the real treasure came from financial documents. Vanguard was a publicly traded company, which meant certain information was available if you knew where to look. And I knew exactly where to look. Late nights in the office had their advantages, like access to systems and files that weren't technically public, but weren't exactly Fort Knox either. The Morrison algorithm, my algorithm that Derek had already renamed, had been licensed to 3 major clients for a combined annual fee of $12 million. But the internal accounting showed only $8 million hitting Vanguard's books. $4 million, vanishing into the ether every year. I traced the missing money through a labyrinth of shell companies and consulting fees. It led to a firm called Ellison Strategic Consulting, registered in Delaware, with 1 employee, Margot Ellison. She was siphoning millions from Vanguard through her husband's position, billing for strategic advisory services that didn't exist. But I needed more than paper trails. I needed allies, people who'd been burned by the Ellisons and wanted revenge as badly as I did. The first was Sandra Kim, Vanguard's former CFO, who'd been forced out 3 years ago after questioning certain financial irregularities. I found her working at a nonprofit in Chicago, her 6-figure salary replaced by a mission to help underprivileged kids learn coding. "Claire Donovan," she said when I showed up at her office, "I heard what they did to you." Classic Margot. "You knew?" Sandra laughed bitterly. "Margot's been sabotaging women at Vanguard for years. Any woman Richard shows respect to becomes a target. I was just the first to get too close to their financial games." She gave me names, other employees who'd been wronged, board members who'd been marginalized, clients who'd been overcharged, each one a potential weapon in my arsenal. The second ally came from an unexpected source, Richard's own brother, Thomas, who'd been pushed out of the family business years ago. I found him at a bar in River North, drunk and bitter. "My brother's a parasite," he slurred after his 4th whiskey. "You want to know the real Richard? Check the Cayman accounts. Check the deals with Sinotech that somehow never made it to board discussions. Check why our head of procurement drives a Lamborghini on a $150K salary. Every conversation, every document, every drunken confession. I recorded everything, built files, created backups of backups. My apartment looked like a detective's evidence room, with documents pinned to walls, connections drawn in red string. If someone had walked in, they'd have thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But it was a controlled insanity, focused and purposeful. I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was building a bomb that would obliterate the Ellisons' carefully constructed world. The dangerous phase began when I started recruiting active employees. People still inside Vanguard who could access what I couldn't, who could be my eyes and ears in meetings I was no longer invited to. Marcus Thompson from IT was my first inside man. He'd been passed over for promotion 5 times, each time told he wasn't leadership material, despite being the genius who kept our entire digital infrastructure running. I approached him carefully, feeling him out over coffee. Hypothetically, I said, stirring my latte, if someone wanted to document certain financial irregularities at Vanguard, what would they need? Marcus studied me for a long moment. Hypothetically, they'd need access to the executive email server and the private cloud where board materials are stored, both of which would be illegal to access without authorization. Of course, purely hypothetical. A week later, a USB drive appeared in my mailbox. No note, no explanation, just gigabytes of emails between Richard and various board members, including several explicitly discussing how to hide the Sinotech dealings from regulatory scrutiny. Jennifer Walsh from legal was harder to convince. She'd been Richard's protégé once, before Margot decided she was too pretty and too smart. Now she was stuck reviewing contracts in a windowless office. Her career stagnated. "What you're suggesting could destroy my career," she said when I laid out what I knew. "Your career is already destroyed. You just haven't admitted it yet." She joined the cause 2 days later, after Derek publicly took credit for a legal strategy she'd developed. Hell hath no fury like a lawyer scorned. But the most dangerous moment came when I tried to approach Patricia, Richard's assistant. I needed her. She had access to everything, knew where all the bodies were buried. But she was also fiercely loyal, or so I thought. I met her at a cafe in Naperville, far from any Vanguard employee's usual haunts. She arrived looking nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. "I know what you're doing," she said before I could speak. "The whole executive floor knows. You're not as subtle as you think." My blood froze. If Richard knew, if Margot knew, I was finished. Not just professionally, legally. What I was doing crossed multiple lines, any one of which could land me in federal prison. "Are you going to tell them?" Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. A young woman, bright-eyed, in a Vanguard polo shirt. My daughter, Amy. She interned at Vanguard 2 summers ago. "Richard." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "Richard made her life hell when she refused his advances. She had emails, evidence. Margot made it all disappear. Then had Amy blacklisted from every tech company in Chicago. She's working at a Starbucks now, her MIT degree worthless." Patricia slid a folder across the table. "Everything you need is in there. Every dirty secret, every hidden account, every crime they thought they'd buried. Destroy them, Claire, destroy them completely." The folder was a treasure trove. Board meeting recordings where Richard explicitly discussed defrauding investors. Margot's emails coordinating the character assassination of former employees. Even photographs from Richard's business trips that were anything but business. But as I walked back to my car, folder clutched to my chest, I realized I'd crossed a point of no return. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore, I was building a conspiracy. If even one person cracked, if anyone decided their loyalty to Richard was stronger than their desire for revenge, I was finished. That night, Margot showed up at my apartment. She stood in my doorway, designer heels clicking impatiently, her face a mask of cold beauty. "I know what you're doing," she said simply. "And it stops now." "Mrs. Ellison," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "What a surprise. Would you like to come in?" She swept past me, Her perfume, something expensive and suffocating, filling my modest apartment. Her eyes took in everything: the basic furniture, the wilting plant by the window, the obvious absence of the luxury she surrounded herself with. "Quaint," she said, the word dripping with disdain. "This is what ambition without connections gets you. What can I do for you?" She turned, and for the first time, I saw the real Margot Ellison. Not the charity gala queen or the CEO's devoted wife, but the predator who'd survived the corporate jungle by being more ruthless than any man. "You can stop your pathetic little investigation. Oh yes, I know all about it. Marcus Thompson, he told us everything. Your little conspiracy is over before it began." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. If Marcus had betrayed me, I was finished. But something in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, told me she was fishing. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. You've been sniffing around our finances, questioning former employees, building your sad little revenge plot. As if someone like you could touch us." She pulled out her phone, showing me a photo. It was me, meeting with Sandra Kim outside her office. "I have a whole file on you, Claire, every meeting, every phone call, one word from me. And you'll be unemployable in any industry, not just tech. I'll bury you so deep, you'll be begging to work at McDonald's. Like you buried Amy Peterson." The name hit her like a slap. Patricia's daughter. Her perfectly composed mask cracked for just a second. "I don't know who that is." "MIT graduate, interned at Vanguard. Your husband got handsy, she reported it, and you destroyed her life. I have the emails. Margot, your emails, coordinating her blacklisting. You have nothing." I walked to my desk, maintaining eye contact the entire time, and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a copy of an email where Margot explicitly told the head of HR to make the Amy problem disappear permanently. This is just one page. I have hundreds. Financial fraud, sexual harassment cover-ups, bribery, enough to destroy both of you. Margot's face had gone pale, but she rallied quickly. "You're bluffing. Even if you had such documents, releasing them would be corporate espionage. You'd go to prison. Maybe, but you'd go down with me. And unlike you, I don't have much left to lose." We stood there, two women separated by wealth and status, but united in our mutual hatred. She'd tried to destroy me, and now I had the power to return the favor. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "Money? Your job back? The promotion?" I wanted justice. But now? I smiled. And it must have been chilling because she actually stepped back. "Now I want to watch your world burn." "You're insane." "I'm motivated. There's a difference." She moved toward the door, then paused. "If you release anything, I'll know it came from you, and I will end you. Get in line." After she left, I immediately checked my security system, a new addition after I'd started this war. She'd been alone, no backup, which meant she was scared enough to come herself, but not scared enough to involve Richard yet. I called Patricia immediately. "Margot was just here." "Then we're out of time. Whatever you're planning, you need to do it now." She was right. Margot would go back to Richard. They'd lawyer up, start destroying evidence. I had maybe 48 hours before they made everything disappear. I opened my laptop and logged into the anonymous email account I'd created. The recipient list was already prepared. The Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the SEC, the FBI's white-collar crime division. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I pressed it, there was no going back. The documents would be out there, the investigation would begin, and the Ellisons would know exactly who'd pulled the trigger. But then I thought about all the people they'd destroyed: Sandra, Amy, Jennifer, me. All the careers ended, the dreams crushed, the lives ruined, because Margot felt threatened or Richard felt entitled. I pressed send. The email contained everything: financial documents showing embezzlement, recordings of Richard discussing fraud, Margot's emails covering up sexual harassment, evidence of bribery, insider trading, the whole corrupt empire they'd built. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing. Reporters wanting confirmation, the FBI wanting to meet, and a single text from an unknown number. You're dead, M. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff this time, and sat back to watch the show. By morning, Richard Ellison's picture would be on every financial news site in the country, and Margot's perfect world would be nothing but ashes. The story broke at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Vanguard CEO accused of massive fraud. Documents reveal years of embezzlement and cover-ups. The Wall Street Journal had given it their entire front page, digital edition. By 7 a.m., it was everywhere. CNN, Fox Business, Bloomberg, all running breaking news banners. Richard's photo, that confident smile I'd once admired, now plastered across screens with the word "scandal" beneath it. I watched from my apartment, having called in sick to work. Not that anyone would expect me to show up. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters who'd figured out I was the source, colleagues wanting to know if I'd seen the news, and 17 missed calls from a number I recognized as Vanguard's legal department. The FBI moved faster than I'd expected. By noon, agents were at Vanguard's headquarters, loading boxes of documents into black SUVs. Someone live tweeted the whole thing, including the moment Richard was escorted out in handcuffs. The photo went viral within minutes, the mighty CEO doing the perp walk, his face a mask of shock and rage. Margot tried to play the victim at first. She showed up on Channel 7 News, tears perfectly applied, claiming she'd known nothing about her husband's crimes. But then the second wave of documents hit, the ones I'd sent specifically to gossip sites and social media influencers. Her emails, her voice recordings, her direct involvement in every cover-up. By Thursday, 3 days after my email, Vanguard's stock had plummeted 40%. The board held an emergency meeting that lasted 14 hours. When they emerged, Richard was no longer CEO. He'd been terminated with cause, meaning no golden parachute, no severance, nothing. But the real satisfaction came from watching Margot's world crumble. The Lake Forest Country Club revoked her membership. The charity board she'd dominated quietly requested her resignation. The society women she'd lunched with suddenly had scheduling conflicts whenever she called. Jennifer Walsh sent me a video from inside Vanguard. It showed Derek Morrison being escorted from the building, his personal items in a cardboard box. Turns out he'd been one of Richard's bagmen, helping move the dirty money. The promotion he'd stolen from me had become his downfall. Sandra Kim called me that evening. "Turn on Channel 5, she said, excitement in her voice. I switched channels to find Amy Peterson being interviewed. She was radiant, confident. Nothing like the broken young woman Patricia had described. She detailed Richard's harassment, Margot's threats, the systematic destruction of her career. 3 other women had already come forward with similar stories. By morning, it would be a dozen. I want to thank the brave whistleblower who made this possible, Amy said, looking directly into the camera. You've given us all our voices back. The investigation expanded daily. The FBI found the Cayman accounts Thomas had mentioned, $30 million of embezzled funds. They found the Sinotech bribes, the procurement kickbacks, a web of corruption that went back years. Every thread they pulled revealed 10 more crimes. Richard's legal team abandoned him when the money ran out, frozen by federal prosecutors. His rich friends disappeared like smoke. Even his brother Thomas went on 60 Minutes to detail the family's history of fraud. But Margot's fall was the most complete. Without Richard's power, she was nothing. The designer clothes and jewelry were seized as evidence of money laundering. The Lake Forest mansion was frozen by the FBI. She went from queen bee to pariah in less than a week. I heard from Patricia that Margot had been seen at a Motel 6 in Schaumburg, paying with crumpled cash, her designer luggage replaced with plastic bags. The woman who'd sneered at my modest apartment was now living in a room that rented by the hour. The federal prosecutor called me as a witness, but I was granted immunity in exchange for my testimony. I sat in that courtroom, looking Richard and Margot in the eyes as I detailed every crime I'd uncovered. Richard's face was pure hatred, but Margot's was worse. It was fear. She finally understood what it felt like to be powerless. The verdicts came down 6 months later. Richard got 25 years for fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. Margot got 15 for conspiracy and money laundering. The judge called them parasites who'd corrupted one of America's great companies for personal greed. As they were led away in shackles, Margot looked at me one last time. I smiled and waved. She'd taken my promotion, but I'd taken everything. Vanguard survived, barely. New management came in, cleaned house, and slowly rebuilt. They offered me Derek's old position, my position, but I declined. That place, that dream, belonged to a different version of me. The Claire who played by the rules, who believed merit mattered more than politics. The new Claire had different plans. I started my own consulting firm 6 months after the trial ended, Donovan Strategic Solutions, helping companies identify and eliminate internal corruption. My first client, Vanguard's new board, desperate to ensure nothing like the Ellison scandal ever happened again. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same company that had tried to bury me was now paying me 3 times my old salary to fix their mistakes. I walked those familiar hallways as an outsider, a hired gun brought in to clean up the mess. Marcus Thompson was the new CTO. Jennifer Walsh had become chief legal officer. Patricia ran the entire executive floor with an iron fist and a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. Even Sandra Kim had returned as CFO, bringing her nonprofit sensibility to corporate governance. The people Richard and Margot had stepped on were now running the show. "You could have had this," Jennifer said one day, gesturing at the executive floor. "The traditional way." "No," I replied, looking out at the Chicago skyline from what used to be Richard's office. "They would never have let me have it the traditional way." That was the lesson Margot taught me. The rules only apply to people who aren't willing to break them. Amy Peterson reached out to me a year later. She'd started her own tech company with the settlement money from Vanguard, and it was thriving. She offered me a position on her board of directors, which I accepted. Watching her succeed was better than any revenge. I kept tabs on the Ellisons through public records. Richard was serving his time in a federal prison in Indiana, reportedly working in the laundry room. The man who'd once commanded a corner office now folded orange jumpsuits for 17 cents an hour. Margot was in a women's facility in Kentucky. I heard through the grapevine that she'd tried to run the same Queen Bee routine inside, only to discover that federal inmates weren't impressed by her knowledge of wine pairings and charity galas. Last I heard, she was working in the kitchen, serving food to women she would have once crossed the street to avoid. Sometimes, late at night. I wondered if I'd gone too far, if destroying them so completely had made me as bad as them. But then I'd remember standing in that conference room, watching Derek take what was mine while everyone pretended it was normal. I'd remember Margot's smirk at that Christmas party, already planning my downfall. I'd remember Amy's tears, Sandra's exile, all the careers and dreams sacrificed to feed their greed. No, I hadn't gone too far. I'd gone exactly far enough. My apartment was different now, penthouse, downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The kind of place Margot would have approved of, which made me love it even more. I'd earned it not by playing politics or destroying others, but by standing up to those who did. James reached out once, suggesting we get coffee and catch up. I deleted the message without responding. That version of Claire, the one who might have settled for less, was gone. The new Claire didn't compromise, didn't forgive, and definitely didn't forget. 3 years after that fateful announcement, I received a letter, no return address. But I recognized the handwriting, Margot's perfect penmanship. Now slightly shaky. "You won," it read. "I hope you're satisfied. I hope it was worth becoming like us." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. She still didn't get it. I hadn't become like them. I'd become their worst nightmare. Someone with their ruthlessness, but with something they'd never had. A legitimate grievance and the patience to see justice through. I kept the letter, framed it even, hanging it in my home office next to my business licenses and awards. A reminder of what happens when you underestimate someone because they don't have the right connections, the right marriage, the right pedigree. The last time I visited Vanguard, I stopped by the third-floor break room where those junior analysts had laughed about me being alone with my PowerPoints. They were still there, still junior analysts, while I was signing contracts worth more than their annual salaries. "Ms. Donovan," one of them stammered, nearly dropping her coffee. "We didn't know you were coming today." "Just finishing up some business," I said, smiling warmly. "How's the analyst program treating you? Still gossiping by the coffee machine?" Her face went red. She knew that I knew. I left them there, whispering frantically to each other, and walked out of Vanguard for the last time. In the lobby, there was a new portrait gallery of company leaders. Richard's photo had been removed, replaced by a plaque about ethical leadership. But I didn't need a portrait. Everyone in that building knew my name, knew my story. The woman who'd brought down a CEO and his wife, who'd turned their own weapons against them, who'd refused to quietly accept injustice. I didn't need to sit in that executive director chair anymore, because now everyone knew who really deserved to sit there. The city lights twinkled below my penthouse that night as I poured myself a glass of wine, the really good stuff, the kind Margot used to brag about understanding. I raised it to the window, to the city that had tried to break me and instead had forged me into something harder, sharper, unstoppable. "Cheers, Margot," I said to my reflection. "Thanks for the lesson. Thank you all for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect." If you enjoyed this tale of corporate revenge, please subscribe to my channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments.